Welcome to the press conference on a very historic day, 6th of October 2017. And we have just received the information that ICAN has received the Nobel Peace Prize. My name is Marianne Ejdersten, Director of Communication. We are very proud to host a press conference with our partners, ICAN, and we will give you a lot of space to ask all kinds of questions. But to make the journalist's life easier, we have a special schedule for the press conference. We are going to have a short introduction, who they are, and also a statement from ICAN, and then a congratulation from World Council of Churches. Then we will open up the floor for questions. But we have to finalize at 2:30, because then we have many, many requests from world media, and probably some of you in front of us are also interested to have a special interview. And then we have a team with WCC communication team available to line up all the interviews. And we have also space for interviews, radio recordings, whatever you need. So may I introduce Beatrice Fihn. She's the Executive Director of ICAN. We have Daniel Högsta, Network Coordinator, and Grethe Oster. And on my other side, that's Reverend Dr. Olav Fykse Tveit, the General Secretary of World Council of Churches. Warm welcome. May I ask Beatrice to open up?
Thank you, everyone, for coming here. It's a bit overwhelming. It's been a crazy few hours since we got the phone call. I'm very, very excited. It's a great honor for ICAN to have been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 in recognition of our role in achieving the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This historic agreement, adopted on 7th of July with the backing of 122 states, offers a powerful, much-needed, urgently alternative in a world with threats of mass destructions are allowed to prevail and are escalating at this point. The International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons is a coalition of 468 non-governmental organizations in over 100 countries. By harnessing the power of the people, we have worked to bring an end to the most destructive weapon ever created, the only weapon that poses an existential threat to all of humanity. This prize is really a tribute to the tireless efforts of many millions of campaigners and concerned citizens worldwide who have, ever since the dawn of the atomic age, have loudly protested nuclear weapons, insisting that they can serve no legitimate purpose and must be forever banished from the face of our earth. It's also a tribute to the survivors of atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the hibakusha, and victims of nuclear test explosions around the world, whose searing testimonies and unstinted advocacy were instrumental in securing this landmark agreement. The treaty categorically outlaws the worst weapon of mass destruction and established a clear pathway for their total elimination. It is a response to the ever-deepening concern of the international community that any use of nuclear weapons would inflict catastrophic, widespread, and long-lasting harm on people and our planet. And ICAN, we're really proud to have played a major role in the creation of this treaty, including through advocacy and participation in diplomatic conferences. And we will work continuously in the coming years to ensure its full implementation and universalization. Any nation that seeks a more peaceful world, free from nuclear weapons, will sign and ratify this treaty without delay. The belief of some governments that nuclear weapons are a legitimate and essential source of security is not only misguided, but also dangerous, for it incites proliferation and undermines disarmament. All nations should reject these weapons completely before they are ever used again. This is a time of great global tension, where fiery rhetoric could all easily lead us to unspeakable horror. The specter of nuclear conflict looms large once more. If there's ever a time for states to declare their opposition to nuclear weapons, that moment is now. We applaud all of those states that have already signed and ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and we urge all others to follow their lead. This treaty offers a pathway forward at a time of alarming crisis. Disarmament is not an unrealistic dream. It's an urgent humanitarian necessity. We must humbly thank the Norwegian Nobel Committee. This award shines a needed light on the path the ban treaty provides towards a world free of nuclear weapons. And before it's too late, we must take that path. So thank you very much for that initial statement.
Thank you, Beatrice. I'm looking at the other team members, Daniel and Grethe. Do you want to say something at this stage, or wait until we open up for the floor?
We can wait.
Okay. Then I would like to invite the General Secretary of World Council of Churches, Reverend Dr. Olav Fykse Tveit, to deliver a greeting.
On behalf of the World Council of Churches, a fellowship of 350 Protestant and Orthodox churches around the world, and a member of ICAN, we congratulate you, and we congratulate everybody that has supported your campaign and also have now supported it as states, signing the treaty. And we see this as a great effort of how the voice of the people can be lifted up and strengthened and given a political result. We are very proud of having been part of this work together with you. We are very proud of hosting you here, and we really congratulate you and everybody who has been involved, and particularly you have led this campaign at this very day. It is also a very important day for moral standards in the world. It acknowledges that there must be a moral standard that does not allow mass destruction weapons to be accepted and be regarded as something normal. It should be obvious that that should include nuclear weapons. Today, we have a very strong voice and a very strong attendance saying this must be our common voice. As humanity, as people of faith or non-faith, this must be what we say together. And we are happy also that many countries have taken this responsibility and followed up with the treaty. Yesterday, I convened a meeting of Korean and American church leaders to discuss how can we maintain our relationship with North Korea and the United States and South Korea in dialogue, in visits, in relationship, to build the relationship that can prevent that anybody could come into a situation of using nuclear weapons. It shows that we have to work together, both to prevent any idea of using them, but also to prevent any preparation to use them. Together as civil societies, we have something to do, and this is a great encouragement to everybody in civil society working for peace. Congratulations. I look forward to the day when my government, my Norwegian government, also will sign the treaty.
Thank you very much. It's time to open up for questions from media, and I have many hands already. Let's begin with the man in white. And we have a micro, because you're also live streaming today.
Good afternoon, Jamie Keaton, Associated Press. Could you, some of the world powers, some of the nuclear powers, insist that, particularly with what's happening with North Korea right now, with its ballistic missile programs and its nuclear tests, that they argue that there is a need for a nuclear deterrent, that they need to maintain their nuclear arsenal. What do you say to that?
Thank you. First, I wouldn't call them nuclear powers because it implies that weapons of mass destruction brings power, which I don't agree with. The majority of the world does not have nuclear weapons, and I think they are the ones who show that it is possible. Nuclear weapons do not bring security and stability. We can see that right now. In fact, I think the people in North Korea or the United States or Japan or South Korea do not feel particularly safe, do not feel like it's stable. I think that they bring a lot of insecurity instead. Deterrence means threatening to indiscriminately slaughter hundreds of thousands of civilians in a few seconds. Nuclear weapons are meant to wipe out cities. That's what they're built to do. And that is an unacceptable thing to threaten with. It's something that violates humanitarian law, the laws of war that we have developed. And no state who is serious about humanitarian principles should be doing that kind of activities.
Thank you. Then I have 6, 8, 10. Let's begin with the man in blue here. And I will also invite journalists following us online to send an email to my team member Santi Murphy. You will find all the information online on the front page of World Council of Churches website.
Thank you very much. Tom Miles from Reuters News Agency. Beatrice, 2 days ago you tweeted, Donald Trump is a moron. Do you stand by that statement, and does it make nuclear war more or less likely? Thank you.
Well, this is very awkward now. That was obviously a joke based on the news reports that the Secretary of State had said those words in a meeting. So I was just trying to be funny, which I kind of regret now. But of course, I think that the election of President Donald Trump has made a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with the fact that he alone can authorize the use of nuclear weapons, and there's nothing people can do to stop him. A man that you can bait with a tweet, who seems to be taking rational decisions very quickly, and is sort of not listening to expertise, it just puts a spotlight on what nuclear weapons really mean. There are no right hands for the wrong weapons. So if you are uncomfortable with the idea of Donald Trump having nuclear weapons that he's able to launch, you're really uncomfortable with nuclear weapons in general. I think that's really the message that we want to come across. There's no one who we can trust with the ability to destroy the entire world.
Thanks. Let's take the man next to the one speaking.
Yes, Jamil Chade from the south of São Paulo, Brazil. Also to Beatrice, what is then your take, or what is your suggestion on the crisis today between North Korea and the US?
I think obviously threatening to use nuclear weapons to totally destroy an entire country with nuclear weapons, tests of nuclear weapons and nuclear missiles, all these activities are completely unacceptable and also now illegal under this new treaty. North Korea and the United States should respect that, refrain from such behavior. I think diplomacy, negotiations have shown to be effective in these kind of situations. We've just seen that Iran is complying with the nuclear deal between Iran and others. Diplomacy is a very effective way, so I would urge those two states to engage in negotiations to come to a peaceful solution. But the long-term solution is, of course, to stop relying on nuclear weapons. As long as some countries find it acceptable to threaten to use nuclear weapons, to have nuclear weapons, to develop nuclear weapons, there will always be other states who want that as well. Our solution is to make it illegitimate to have them, to use them, to develop them. And to stigmatize and make sure that we remove the prestige from nuclear weapons.
Thanks. Then it's time for this table. I would go for a man in black and the blue lanyard. That's you. Okay, not John. You're second.
Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency. Beatrice, with this Peace Nobel Prize, do you expect to be more able to engage with the P5, and in what format? And when do you think it should reasonable to think that the new treaty will enter into force?
We hope that this treaty will provide space for dialogue between those states that have not yet signed this treaty. We will work very hard to make sure that as many states sign it as possible and ratify it. It will be ratified. It will enter into force when 50 states have ratified, which we have a goal of the end of 2018 for that, just based on other disarmament treaties, how fast they usually happen. But we will also use this treaty to put pressure on those states that still say that they will never sign it. We have seen past examples of the treaties prohibiting other weapons, like chemical weapons, biological weapons, landmines, and cluster munitions, that these treaties do have an impact on policies and behavior on states not party to them. Whether or not they like it, it does change things when the rest of the international community declares these weapons illegal. So we have great hopes, and we will spend no effort in using this treaty, using this prize, to really make an impact on the states that haven't signed the treaty. It will take time, but we will get there, I think.
What kind of engagement with them?
I think it's this prize really rewards the entire campaign, all the organizations that work tirelessly around the world through parliamentary pressure, media work, public mobilization, inspiring a new generation who grew up after the Cold War to rethink how we see these weapons.
John?
Yes, good afternoon. Jan Habermann. I write for various media outlets in Germany and German-speaking countries. It's for you, Beatrice. First question, what was your initial reaction when you got the phone call from Oslo? And secondly, could you please elaborate a little bit more on your campaign? You were saying the power of the people. It's a grassroots campaign, as far as I understand it. Could you please tell us a little bit more how you work? What are your channels? You know, how do you approach politicians and all the rest of it? Thanks.
Well, first was just shocked. It was just a few minutes before the announcement that we got the phone call, and it's really hard to believe it at first. So we were a little bit worried that it was a prank, and couldn't really be that excited until we actually saw the live feed and heard our name being mentioned. And even then, I still not really sure I believe it. So obviously extremely excited and happy, a bit confused as to how do you handle these kind of things. It's not like we won a Nobel Peace Prize before. So it's, very, very excited. The campaign works in many different ways. We have everything from activists doing street actions, for example, to draw attention, to advocates who work very closely to parliamentarians and other decision makers. We work in the United Nations, we work locally, we work sort of on all aspects of what civil society engages with people and politicians. So it's a lot of work. We tweet a lot, not only about Donald Trump, but also other things. A lot of social media work, communications work, trying to explain to people what nuclear weapons are, what they would do to people if they were used, and that there is a possibility to change. We do not have to take this for granted. We do not have to just accept nuclear weapons. We can actually change things.
Thanks. Then we have one more question at this table. That's the lady in blue. Everyone is dressed in blue today. And then we will move to that table.
Hello, it's Christiana with the German press agency. What are you going to do with the prize money?
Well, we haven't gotten them yet, so no, I don't know. I mean, obviously, that is a discussion we have to have internally, also with ICAN's leadership, our steering group. But I would imagine that we will use it in the way we see best to strengthen the campaign, to ensure that as many states as possible sign on and become parties to this treaty, that the treaty creates a new norm, and that the norm has an impact on states outside the treaty.
Thanks. Then we will move to this table, the man in green. Santi.
Thanks. Good. I didn't dress in black today. Mark Engelhardt from the German Public Radio. Two questions. You answered it half, but anyway, how do you think this prize is gonna change your campaign and the success of your campaign? Do you think it's gonna convince states to join, which otherwise probably wouldn't have? And secondly, you could be based in New York or anywhere else in the world. You're based in Greater Geneva area. Could you tell us why here?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say already now how this will change campaigning, but obviously we've been pretty successful, I think. We got a treaty, and we only existed for 10 years. So I imagine that we will do just more of what we've been doing, having more authority, maybe get yes to more meetings now, I don't know. So I think we will continue in the way that we have before, but obviously this prize brings extra power to our messages, I think. Geneva is a really important place, the sort of the capital for a lot of disarmament issues, but also for humanitarian issues. We have great partners here in the United Nations, the ICRC, actors like World Council of Churches, and a lot of other partner organizations of ICAN are based here. It's a city where you can sort of both have the disarmament and the humanitarian part, which is sort of builds the whole basis for this treaty, that disarmament is because of a humanitarian imperative. We're not disarming because of strategic stability, but we're disarming because of the impact that weapons will have on civilians, on people. So I think this Geneva is an excellent city for that. Also the Human Rights Council and things like that. So it's a great place to be working in.
Daniel?
Yeah, I think just to add to that as well, we've worked a lot over the last few years to in multilateral diplomatic spheres to make this treaty happen. But we've always seen the treaty as a tool to kind of embolden civil society action back home. So I think one thing that you'll see us do, and Beatrice mentioned this, is to really bring the treaty back home to countries that are compliant with the nuclear weapons arrangements, umbrella countries, and we'll really work hard with parliamentarians to change the concrete policies in those countries. And through that work, we'll begin to make put a lot more pressure on the nuclear weapons states. It's not just the nuclear weapons states that are complicit in the nuclear weapons arrangements, it's also these umbrella countries. So we will be working very hard to put pressure on those countries internally to change their relationship with nuclear weapons.
Okay, Grethe?
Just to add one point on that, one concrete impact that this support from the Nobel Committee will have, I believe, is that it will be so much easier for us to get the attention of media. If you knew how hard we've worked over the past few years to get media's attention, to get media to cover the risks that nuclear weapons expose us to, and not just a narrative that comes from some suits, from the P5 about security, balance and stability. If you knew how hard we worked, look at how many are here today. So that's a very concrete impact that will give us a lot of wind in our sails as we use this prize to do this next phase, getting as many countries as possible to sign as quickly as possible and start using this treaty to have real impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have a man in grey there.
Thank you. Stéphane Bissal, Le Temps newspaper. Some states argue that the ban treaty that was adopted in New York in July in a way polarizes the international community, since nuclear powers and NATO members didn't participate in the conference. How do you see that, the nuclear non-proliferation treaty? How do you see that in the light of of the prize, Nobel Prize?
I think it's not the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons that polarizes this issue, that divides us. It's nuclear weapons. This treaty has really put a spotlight on a very simple question: are nuclear weapons acceptable or not? And for a very long time, a lot of governments have felt very comfortable with claiming in public that they are in favor of nuclear disarmament, but they keep defending nuclear weapons and need to have them themselves. Others can't have them, but we need to have them because there might be threats in the future or something like that. So I think it's really this treaty and the process of negotiations have not caused any division. It has just exposed perhaps the inconsistent policies of some states. If you want to work for a world free of nuclear weapons, if you want to make sure that no new states get nuclear weapons, you need to be ready to reject nuclear weapons as well. And this treaty really demands that they walk the walk as well.
Then we will move to the table in the center, the lady. I'll come back to you later. Don't worry.
Thank you. Lisa Schlein, Voice of America. I would like to ask you what you think of the nuclear arms treaty with Iran. Donald Trump doesn't seem to like it very much. And then I'm wondering, are you afraid that now that you have received this Nobel Peace Prize, that it might have the same fate as the Nobel Peace Prize had upon Mr. Obama when he received it? There was so much hope that he might be able to accomplish something, and unfortunately that hope never materialized.
I think that the Iran deal is really important, and it would be really, really unfortunate and a huge security risk for the world if that was ripped up, especially at a time when Iran is complying with the deal. So I think that that deal needs to remain and be supported. And I think that the work of civil society on nuclear disarmament has been going on since 1945, pretty much, and it will not stop. We will continue until all nuclear weapons are eliminated. I don't think that we can have unrealistic expectations that tomorrow all nuclear weapons will be gone. We know it will take time. We will know it will take a lot of patience. But I think this is a really a moment to be really inspired that it is possible to do something. We're getting this prize not because we say we will do something next time. We are getting this prize because we have achieved a really big step. The treaty is here. It was adopted in July. It opened for signature just a few weeks ago in New York. So I think that that's going to be the foundation which we build for more progress on.
Thanks. We will take a second question at that same table. The lady in green.
Thank you. Elizabeth Isakova from Russian news agency RIA Novosti. Actually, it's a follow-up of the question of my colleague, because people already started complaining that you're, you are not doing like, you haven't done really anything special for the nuclear treaty. So people started questioning your Nobel Peace Prize. So the question is like, why do you think you received this Nobel Peace Prize? The first one, and the second one is that I think the major goal is to ask North Korea to sign and ratify this new treaty. So how are you going to deal with this? How are you going to influence them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that. Well, I mean, I think it's impossible not to be criticized by someone in these days. We have a treaty, and we have worked really hard these last years to get states to reject nuclear weapons, to make a legally binding commitment to never under any circumstances use or possess or develop nuclear weapons. And we achieved that this summer. And now the work continues to get more states to sign and ratify, and so we're very excited about that. And we will continue to work, of course, to make sure that all the nuclear-armed states sign on to this treaty. We will make sure that while they don't, in the meantime, before they sign on to this treaty, it will still have an impact on their policies. And that goes for states that have just recently developed nuclear capabilities and those that did it the first.
Thanks for that. We will go back to that table. A man in blue, glasses.
Thank you. Frédéric Durand with NHK Japanese Public TV. You mentioned that a bit in your opening remarks, but could you elaborate a bit on the influence of the hibakusha for the whole campaign and maybe more widely of the Japanese peace movement? And then a second question, what would be your message today to these umbrella states that were mentioned also? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that the hibakusha, the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, have been absolutely instrumental. They have worked tirelessly since 1945 to raise awareness of this issue, to tell their stories. And the humanitarian initiative that was started the work with this treaty was really based on their perspective. What happens when nuclear weapons are used? We talk a lot about what different presidents in different countries think and say and their calculations, but what happens to the people? And we need to judge a weapon's acceptability based on what it does when used, rather than people's theories about what it potentially could do or not do. So I think it's the hibakusha and also survivors of nuclear testing around the world have been not only a key partner of the campaign, but key actors in the process to negotiate this treaty. The treaty also has a really great legal obligation to provide assistance to victims of nuclear detonations and environmental remediation. which has never been done before in any nuclear weapons treaty, which is really meant to address the concerns of survivors and to help them afterwards. So that's obviously a big issue for the Japanese government, who still haven't signed this treaty, a treaty that is based on the perspective of their own citizens. And then umbrella question I'm going to leave for Grethe.
On umbrella states, I work daily in one of them, Norway, the country that where the Nobel Committee has announced this prize today. The states that adopted the treaty prohibiting nuclear weapons have done so because they have realized that it is inevitable that there will be a nuclear disaster unless we do something. I hope that this prize can motivate umbrella states to also understand and learn more about those risks in order to make them see that actually the most loyal thing that they can do as allies, as NATO countries, is to work to achieve another solution, a solution for sustainable security, rather than choosing permanent insecurity the way they are doing today. So I would encourage my own country, Norway, to now really use this prize to start a process of looking at what does this prize mean for us as NATO countries and how can we relate to it. So far, they have just simply rejected it and also encouraged other countries not to sign it. I certainly hope that will stop. And that they will at least be appreciative of those countries that want to take the first steps. We cannot wait for the worst actors among us before we pass laws on what's right and wrong. And that's what I hope that this Nobel Peace Prize will create more understanding for, also in umbrella states. Thank you.
Thank you. We have at least 20 more people who want to ask questions. I will do my best. I will let Daniel have a few minutes, but then I will try to speed up a little bit, that we are able to have much more questions. And then after the press conference, it's possible to get special interviews. And then you will try to catch Santi, and she will organize it for you.
Thank you. I just had just two quick additions to what you said. And first of all, on the issue of the hibakusha, I really want to point out and name some of them who have worked on this. Setsuko Thurlow, there's no more passionate and emotional speaker about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. She brought the negotiations to tears in her final statement on July 7th. There's no more powerful speaker about the ban treaty than her, given her personal experience with this. There's also Nihon Hidankyo and Gensukyo working in the Japanese context. We've been very lucky to work with them on this, and they bring a very unique and special perspective on it. And also perhaps to an earlier question about does this treaty matter or not. The nuclear weapon states are well aware of the potential and the power of this treaty, and as Grethe mentioned, that they wouldn't be working so hard to try to stop it with their behind-the-scenes pressure and those kind of let's say dirty tactics with pressuring states not to sign this treaty if they weren't concerned about the impact that it could have on the legitimacy of their possession of nuclear weapons.
Thanks. Then you have to move to this table, the lady in orange, and then we will take the man in blue.
Hi, Gunilla von Hall, Swedish, Svenska Dagbladet, Beatrice. There were a lot of reports and signs that the US has been pressuring countries not to sign the treaty. You're aware of this, I know. What do you think about this? How concerning is this? And what impact will this have in the treaty actually becoming reality? Thank you.
Well, the treaty is still a reality, despite the pressure. But it's been very significant amount of lobbying and pressuring, scaremongering, threats, in a way, from several nuclear-armed states on their allies, on other countries, on former colonies. which to us shows the real impact. We've had, I'm sure many of you, those Geneva-based correspondents, have been to press conferences here by the US devoted to just complaining about this treaty, which I think they would not do if they weren't worried that it actually matters. They have seen, for example, other recent disarmament treaties, such as the Landmines Convention and the Cluster Munitions Convention, have had an impact on their weapons policies. They have had to change things. World production has gone down, for example. Divestment campaigns have started. It does change when international law says something is illegal. And they are afraid of that. And they are fighting with everything they got to keep the legitimacy around these weapons, whereas we are working very hard to remove the prestige and remove the remove that legitimacy from these weapons. So I think it probably has to have an impact on some states. It's hard for small countries to withstand the enormous pressure of the most powerful countries in the world in some ways, most richest countries in the world, the biggest military. But at the same time, wanting nuclear weapons to be illegal is not a difficult choice for most. It's quite a straightforward yes or no question.
Thanks. We will move to the man in blue.
Oh, thank you. My name is Kobayashi. Japanese Newswire Service Kyoto News reporter. Yeah, I have a question about hibakusha. You mentioned yes, hibakusha played a great role for making the treaties, and you are going to Oslo in December to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Do you have a plan to go there with hibakusha?
We haven't really gotten that far in our thinking, but obviously I don't even know how it works with the actual ceremony or who is actually get to be there or not. So I can't really answer any of those questions. But personally, I would love for survivors to be there. This is their award just as much as ours.
Thanks for that. Then we have another man next in blue.
Daniel, Beatrice, congratulations. My question is, one thing is if possible, could you tell us any unforgettable scene behind the door? How did you push the proponent state towards the ban treaty? And also another thing is also related with the hibakusha things. And Daniel, you mentioned about the powerful speech by the Setsuko Tharo. But what was the most important part of her speech? What was the real message to entire world? This is a kind of question. Thank you.
So I'll just take the first part. It's, obviously this award was given to the civil society coalition who's been working on this treaty. And we, of course, think that we are really important for that, but there's been many more actors involved in this process that we worked very, very closely with. And I just want to praise some of the governments who have led this, who have withstood the enormous pressure from nuclear armed states, individual diplomats that have had the courage to drive this, politicians that started the humanitarian initiative from the beginning with an Oslo conference in Norway in 2013, a conference in Mexico, in Nayarit in 2014, in Vienna in 2014 as well, with the humanitarian pledge, countries championing this resolution that starts the negotiations. And of course also other international organizations. The International Committee for the Red Cross and the Red Cross movement have been instrumental in working for this treaty. The United Nations and its humanitarian system have worked really hard for it, and many, many others. So we've worked very closely in partnership with governments and international organizations and civil society to bring this treaty about. And that's, so it's many, many different types of actors involved.
Yeah, just on the point about Setsuko, I mean, what's most powerful is it's a very personal thing, but I think for me, when I was listening to her speech, it was maybe two things. First of all, it was the condemnation of the states that kind of sit on their hands on the sidelines or actively try to undermine the process to prohibit nuclear weapons. And I think she spoke very forcefully to Japan on that point as well. But I think also it's what really made me tear up, and I'm sure others as well, is her forward-lookingness. You know, it's not just about correcting past trauma, past injustices. It's making sure that nobody in future generations has to suffer that same thing. And I think that's the most beautiful and powerful thing that she mentioned in her statement. Thank you.
Thanks for that. We have one more question at that table, and then we'll go back to this table, and that's the third question, and I have one word over there.
Thank you very much. Gabriela Sotomayor, Mexican journalist. Could you talk about Latin America and the role in the adoption of this treaty? Thank you.
Yes, I think the Latin American group of states have been really at the forefront of this. It was the region that prohibited nuclear weapons regionally first out of everyone through the Tlatelolco Treaty, which was actually a response to the huge sort of risk scenario of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I think it's also a reminder that at times of great risk and great tensions, huge progress can be made. Because it makes us focus on what's important. And so the Latin American states have been really driving. We've had countries like Mexico, of course, and Brazil leading the negotiations. And the entire region has been supportive of it. I think not all of them have yet signed, but we're positive that most of them will quickly.
Daniel?
Yeah, and in addition to Latin America, and certainly they've had a driving role, and I'd urge you just to look at the states that have voted yes on the adoption of this treaty. In addition to Latin America and the Caribbean, African states voted overwhelmingly for this, Asian states, and very poignantly, I think also Pacific Island states as well were very powerful in pushing forward this treaty. So those are the states that know, I mean, they recognize that the impact of nuclear weapons is a global one. It crosses borders and generations, and they know that their citizens, they have a responsibility to their citizens also to push forward this prohibition. So it's thanks to them that we're at this point.
Thanks. Then we'll go back to this table. Reuter, I think. Pamela. Okay.
Thank you very much. Many states, especially the United States, are putting their trust in missile defense systems to protect themselves against nuclear threat. Is that not enough to mean that we can all sleep soundly at night? What do you say about missile defense systems? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about that, but in reality, they've shown to be quite ineffective. I don't have the statistics or the facts around it in my head right now, but I think I heard something that they hit the missile 50% of the time when they know it's being launched and where it's being launched from. So, of course, if you would have an unexpected launch or many launches, and of course, that doesn't take away from the risk of an accident, miscalculation, or someone using a nuclear weapon as in a terrorist attack or anything like that. So it doesn't address the problem of having weapons that are meant to wipe out entire cities. Is that acceptable or not?
Then we have one more question at this table. Santi?
Yes. Beatrice, what do you say to people who say that you can't put the genie back in the bottle, in the sense that nuclear weapons exist, and as you know, there have been either violators or countries that have not signed on to the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, and that if this ban goes all the way, that ultimately only quote unquote the bad guys will have nuclear weapons and the good guys will not. I mean, is it possible to put the genie back in the bottle?
I mean, of course, knowledge exists, but it's what we do with the knowledge that matters. I mean, technology goes out of fashion all the time. We can't uninvent the knowledge on how to make chemical weapons or biological weapons, but we have rejected those anyway. I think that sort of feeds into this how nuclear weapons sometimes are seen as not weapons, but magical power tools in a way. They're just weapons, and we can choose or not if we want to use them. And it is a decision that people can impact. So I think I also think that the militaries need to look at what is actually, what kind of weapons should we have in our arsenals today? Is this a weapon that have any military utility at all? Do we think that wiping out entire cities of civilians, is that an acceptable military target today or a military strategy? Technology in weapons areas goes a very different way. It's not about who can kill the most civilians. It's rather fewer civilians and targeted things and automated things. So I think this is old technology, 1945. It's not modern day weapons. It's not modern day military might in a way. So I think it's definitely possible. Just because it exists doesn't mean that we have to use it, and we need to work on not wanting to use it.
Thanks. Then we have a final question. Okay, Grethe.
I'd like to add one thing on that. This genie in the bottle argument. There is this tendency that unless you can tell me how we're going to get rid of the last 2 weapons, how that's going to work out, don't suggest anything. And that's what we need to get beyond. That's what this treaty really tries to do. Because it matters if we have 15,000 nuclear weapons as today, or 1,000, or 100, or 50, or 2. And the vision of a world without nuclear weapons is going, when we reach it, is going to be one where we still have to work continuously with non-proliferation, stigmatization, and disarmament, continuously, just as we do on chemical weapons and on biological weapons. And it's very doable.
Thanks. Then we have a final question here, and then we'll organize other kind of interviews.
Thank you. Beatrice, actually 2 questions. First, in 2009, Obama in Prague had a very important speech, perhaps in the direction that is not the one of today. What went wrong, in your opinion, for the last 10 years? Why did that not work out? And secondly, can you tell us a little bit of your structure here? What is your budget? How many people do you have? $1 million is how much in your budget? Basically, how do you work?
In terms of what went wrong, I don't know. I think the speech that President Obama did in 2009 was hugely important. It showed a vision. It showed that also nuclear armed states could have that vision, and leaders in nuclear armed states could have that vision. And it put a lot of pressure on other states, the other nuclear armed states. So I think that once there is another leader like that in a nuclear armed states, this treaty will be here to support that kind of vision. There perhaps wasn't enough concrete support from the rest of the world in terms of making it happen. So I think it's just it's hard for one person like him to make a big impact in countries where there's a lot of resistance to that, where there's an industry that doesn't want to let that happen, where the perhaps military won't agree with it. What we're doing is try to devalue nuclear weapons, make it easier for these kind of leaders to take those steps. As long as we say that nuclear weapons are valuable and important and necessary, we are not going to make progress on disarmament. We need to give them reasons for why it's rational and simple and straightforward to take the decisions to cut further down in arsenals and eventually eliminate. In terms of budget and ICAN, we have a very small office up here. Some of you have already invaded it a little bit this morning. We only have in the ICAN staff team, we're 3.5 people working on sort of coordinating the campaign. So it's extremely small. But obviously we have 468 partner organizations in ICAN, many of them with their own resources and staff working on this issue. So there's people all over the world who works on that. But the actual campaign office, in a way, is very small. So this prize means a huge amount of things to us. It's going to be very, very helpful to continue and increasing the pressure we can mount on states to get rid of nuclear weapons.
Thank you. Time flies, especially when we have an interesting topic in front of us, and I have been counting 6 more people. We don't have the time, but I would like to ask the General Secretary of World Council of Churches to remind us why we are here today.
2 sentences from the Norwegian Nobel Committee's declaration this morning. It is now 71 years since the UN General Assembly, in its very first resolution, advocated the importance of nuclear disarmament and a nuclear weapon-free world. With this year's award, the Norwegian Nobel Committee wishes to pay tribute to ICAN for giving new momentum to the efforts to achieve this goal.
Thank you, everyone in the room, and we will do our best to provide interviews for each of you if you are interested to talk to anyone in the ICAN team or anyone else. Santa will organize, and I know that Beatrice, she's running up to her office, and there is another media waiting. And feel free to contact me if you need any support to finalize your work, because you are also peacemakers. You are telling the story around the world today, how to make peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Spring nu. Ja, nu springer han. Jag måste springa till. Varför är det så? Okej. Var det dagen?